Can you please? Then the line went dead. 3 words. That was all she gave him. No address, no explanation, just her voice shredding apart at the edges like something had already broken inside her before she even dialed. Any other man would have called back. Any other man would have waited for morning. But Dominic Rourke was not any other man. He was the man this city whispered about and prayed it never had to face directly. And in 40 seconds flat, he was dressed armed and burning every red light between him and her. Nobody on earth made him move like that. Nobody. Until tonight. If those 3 words just stopped your heart the way they stopped his hit subscribe, right now drop your city in the comments below and don't you dare leave until this story is finished. I want to see exactly how far this reaches. Can you please? That was it. That was all she said before the line collapsed into silence. So complete it felt like a wall had fallen. Dominic Rourke pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at the screen. Her name was still glowing on it. Elena Marsh, assistant. He had stared at a lot of things over the course of his life, things most men never saw and were better off never seeing. But those 2 words on that screen at 2:07 in the morning did something to him that nothing else had managed in a very long time. They scared him, not the way danger scared him. He knew danger. He'd lived inside danger the way other men lived, inside houses comfortable with its layout, familiar with every exit. This was different. This was the specific cold that only comes when the thing at risk isn't yourself. He called back immediately. 6 rings, voicemail. He called again. 4 rings, voicemail. He was already moving coat off the hook keys off the counter through the door and into the elevator before his mind had fully assembled the decision. His hands were doing what his gut told him to do, and his gut was telling him something was very, very wrong. His phone rang. He grabbed it. Not Elena, Vincent, his head of security. "Tell me you're already working on this," Dominic said without greeting. "Working on what, sir?" "Elena Marsh just called me at 2 in the morning, said 3 words and dropped the line. Find her phone. Find her car. Do it now. Do it fast and call me back in 60 seconds or don't call me back at all." He heard Vincent's chair scrape back over the line before it went quiet. The elevator opened to the parking level. Dominic moved through it without slowing. He was not going to wait for Marcus. Marcus was asleep somewhere, and waking him up would cost 90 seconds he did not have. He got into the black car himself, a vehicle that most people in his world understood was not just transportation, and he was out of the garage before the building's security camera had fully registered him leaving. His phone buzzed. "Vincent. At Caldwell Street, sir. Rail District. Her phone's been stationary for 14 minutes. Battery's live." Dominic's hands tightened on the wheel. Caldwell Street. He ran it through his head, the geography, the demographics, the quiet institutional failure of a neighborhood that the city's money had moved around rather than through. Bad lighting, minimal foot traffic at any hour. The kind of block where someone could do something and be 3 zip codes away before anyone thought to ask questions. "What the hell is she doing on Caldwell?" he said. "I don't know," Vincent said. "You want a team?" "No team." Again, sharper than he meant it. "I want you monitoring her phone. If it moves, if the battery drops, if anything changes, you call me mid-sentence if you have to." "Understood." "Understood." He pressed the accelerator down and let the engine say the rest. Twan. He saw her car from half a block away. Silver sedan parked at an angle, driver's door not fully shut. The interior light bleeding out into the dark street like a wound that hadn't been closed. He killed his headlights as he pulled up, scanning automatically, reading the street the way years of surviving it had taught him to. Nobody visible, nobody moving. 2 parked cars ahead that hadn't been driven recently, wrong kind of dust on the hoods. A broken street lamp on the left, a shuttered loading dock on the right, and 15 feet from the open car door, sitting on the concrete step of a building that had given up on itself a long time ago, Elena. She had her knees pulled to her chest, her arms locked around them, her head down. She was wearing exactly what she'd had on at the office that morning, which meant she had never made it home to change. Her hair usually pinned back with that quiet precision that was so completely, her was half unraveled, falling across one side of her face. On the ground near the car, face down on the asphalt, was her phone, a crack across the screen catching the light. Dominic got out of the car. The sound of his door made her head come up, fast, sharp, defensive, the reflexive flinch of someone who had already been frightened tonight and hadn't fully come down from it. When she saw who it was, something happened in her face. Not relief exactly, more like the specific exhaustion of a person who has been holding themselves together by force of will and has just been given permission to stop. He crossed to her and crouched down, putting himself at her eye level. He looked at her, really looked the way he rarely allowed himself to, taking inventory, the redness around her eyes, the shallow, uneven rhythm of her breathing, the small cut on her left forearm, fresh enough that it had only just dried. "Where are you hurt?" he asked. "I'm not." She winced when she shifted her weight on the step. "Elena." "I'm okay," she said. The steadiness in her voice cost her something. He could see the effort it required. "I didn't know who else to call. I'm sorry. I know it's—" "Don't apologize." He kept his voice level with some effort. "Look at me. Are you hurt anywhere else?" She shook her head. She meant it this time. "Good," he said. "Now tell me everything." And she did. She had stayed in the office until past midnight. Not unusual, she told him, with the Thursday meeting coming up. She'd taken her regular route home. About 12 minutes in, she noticed a car behind her. Dark, no-readable plates keeping pace with unusual consistency. She'd made 3 turns she had no reason to make, just to test it. It made all 3. "I panicked," she said, and the words came out like an admission she wasn't proud of. "I know I should have called someone immediately, but I thought if I just got somewhere populated—" "You didn't panic," Dominic said quietly. "You made smart choices under pressure. Keep going." Something shifted slightly in her expression. She continued. She'd ended up on Caldwell after a wrong turn she couldn't undo fast enough. The car had pulled up alongside her and stopped. A man got out. Medium height, dark jacket, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world, like this was a scheduled appointment he was simply keeping. "He didn't threaten me," Elena said. "He just stood there, long enough to make sure I understood that he could do whatever he wanted and there was nothing I could do about it. Then he leaned toward my window and said," she stopped, "Reset. Tell your boss his clock is running out." Then he got back in the bum and they drove away. The air between them sat very still. Dominic said nothing for a moment. He let the words exist without reacting to them, the way he'd learned to receive information that needed to be processed rather than felt, at least right now, at least in front of her. "Did you get a look at him?" he asked. His voice was measured, professional. A voice from the office, not from whatever was happening underneath it. "Enough of one," Elena said. She looked him directly in the eye. He had a tattoo on his right hand, a bird wing spread, a crow, I think. The temperature in Dominic's chest dropped 10 degrees. He kept his face completely still. A crow, wings spread, right hand. He knew that mark. He knew it the way you know a road you've driven in the dark, by feel, by instinct, by the memory of what it led to the last time. That was a Galvani mark. The Galvani family had not had operational presence in this city in over 4 years. They'd been pushed out methodically, conclusively, at significant cost, and the understanding that had followed was supposed to be ironclad. They stayed in their territory. He stayed in his. The boundary held because both sides understood what crossing it would mean. Someone had crossed it. Someone had walked up to Elena Marsh's car window, looked her in the eyes, shown her that tattoo, and let her walk away specifically so that she would describe it to him. This wasn't just a message, it was a demonstration. We can reach the people closest to you. We already have, and we want you to know it. Dominic, Elena's voice pulled him back to the surface. Her eyes were sharper now. She was watching him with the focused attention she gave to everything that mattered. And he recognized with a kind of grim certainty that she had noticed the moment his expression changed. "You recognize it. The tattoo." Not a question. He held her gaze. "Get up," he said gently. "Can you stand?" "I can stand, and I asked you a question." "I know you did." He extended his hand to her. "And I'll answer it. Not here." She looked at his hand. For a moment, she didn't take it, and he understood it was about more than stubbornness, that she was making a decision about trust in real time, weighing 3 years of working beside him against this moment, this street, this darkness. She took his hand. He put her in the passenger seat of his car. He retrieved her phone from the pavement, cracked screen, still functional, and handed it to her without comment. He produced a bottle of water from somewhere in the back and set it in the cup holder beside her. He made 2 calls standing outside the car with the door half open, his voice too low for her to hear clearly, his body language telling her everything about the call's contents even without the words. By the time he got in behind the wheel, we had drunk half the water and stopped shaking. "You're not going home tonight," he said. "I know. I have a property. I know." She turned to look at him. "Dominic, I need you to tell me something real right now. Not the version you'd tell someone you're trying to protect. The real version." He started the car. He pulled out onto Caldwell Street, heading away from where this had happened. He felt her waiting. "Someone in the city has been making moves," he said, choosing each word with care. "Someone who was supposed to stay gone. Tonight wasn't random. They chose you because they know who you are to me." He paused. "They were sending me a message and you were the envelope." She absorbed that. He watched her do it, the slight tension at the corners of her mouth, the controlled, deliberate quality of the breath she drew in. "Who knew my schedule tonight?" she asked. He glanced at her. "Don't look at me like I had just surprised you," she said. "They knew I was going to be on that road at that hour. That's not something you find out by accident. Someone told them." She paused. "Someone told them, and that someone is on the inside, though." Dominic's jaw tightened. "Yes," he said simply. "Okay." She nodded once like a woman filing an important document. "Okay, then that's the real problem. Not just the people in that car." "Yes," he said again. She turned back to the windshield. A long stretch of silence that was somehow not uncomfortable, the particular silence of 2 people thinking hard in the same direction. Then she said very quietly, "I almost didn't call you." Something cracked open in his chest very slightly. "Why?" he asked, his voice coming out lower than he intended. "Because I didn't think—" She stopped, started again more carefully. "I've been your assistant for 3 years. I know my role. Calling you at 2 a.m. about something happening to me didn't feel like—" She searched for the word. "I wasn't sure it fell within the boundaries of what I was allowed to need from you." He pulled to a stop at a red light and turned to look at her fully. She was already looking at him. "Elena," he said, "if you are ever in a situation where you need me, you call. That is not about the job. That has nothing to do with your role or the contract or business hours or what you think I'll consider appropriate. You call and I come. That is not negotiable. Do you hear me?" She held his gaze for a long, measured moment. "I hear you," she said. The light turned green. Neither of them moved immediately. Then he turned back to the road and drove. He took her to the townhouse on Ashford Lane, the property that didn't exist on paper under his name, the one he kept for exactly the kind of situation where visibility would be a liability. There was already a security detail on the perimeter by the time they arrived. He had arranged it in the 2 minutes she'd spent in the passenger seat while he made his calls. He showed her to the 2nd floor, pointed out the room at the end of the hall, told her there was a woman named Kara on staff who could get her anything she needed, and told her to lock the door from the inside of habit, not out of necessity. She stood in the doorway and looked at him. "What are you going to do tonight?" she asked. "Make some calls." "To who?" "People who owe me answers." She studied him. "Be careful," she said, and the 2 words were simple, plain, completely unadorned, and somehow landed like something much larger. He nodded once, turned. "Dominic." He stopped. "Whoever it is inside your circle, they used me to get to you." Her voice was quiet and absolutely clear. "When you find out who it is, I want to know." He turned back slowly, looked at her, the cut on her arm, the tiredness behind her eyes, the absolute refusal to be diminished by any of this. "I'll tell you," he said. It was a promise. He didn't make many of those. He went downstairs through the house and into the back study. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number that rang twice before a voice answered, slow, deliberate, the voice of a man who understood that phone calls at this hour arrived with serious weight. "Arthur," Dominic said, keeping his voice low and entirely flat. "When did the Galvani family come back into the city?" A pause that said more than any words could have. "Dominic." "Don't." Just that word, soft as a blade being set down on a table. "Don't give me the managed version. How long?" Another pause. "Longer. Then 6 weeks. We believed it was financial. We didn't think it was going operational. One of their men was in front of my assistant's car window tonight, Dominic said. Caldwell Street, midnight. He showed her a crow tattoo and told her to give me a message. He let that sit for exactly 3 seconds. They wanted me to know they got that close to her, Arthur. They picked her specifically. The silence from Arthur's end was the kind that meant a man was recalculating quickly. There's someone inside, Dominic continued. Someone fed them her schedule, her route, her name. I need everything you have on Galvani's local contacts, and I need it by morning. He paused. And Arthur, the person who gave them that information. They are still inside, which means every call I make, every move I telegraph, it's visible. He let that land. So this conversation didn't happen. Understood, Arthur said quietly. The call ended. Dominic sat in the silence of the study for a long time. Somewhere upstairs, Elena was trying to sleep in a room she'd never been in a house she hadn't known existed, because someone had decided she was a useful instrument, had decided she was a message to be delivered, had looked at her, this woman who showed up every morning with her quiet precision and her unbreakable composure and her complete refusal to be anything less than extraordinary at what she did, and seen nothing but leverage. Dominic had operated in this world for over 20 years. He had made his peace with most of it, or what passed for peace in a life like his. He had made the necessary trades, carried the necessary weight, and accepted the terms. But they had put their hands near Elena Marsh. And that he understood now, sitting in the dark at the tail end of the worst 2 hours he'd had in years, that was the one term he had not agreed to. The one line that no one had asked his permission to cross. They were about to find out what that cost. He didn't sleep. Not a single hour, not even the shallow, half-conscious kind that passes for rest in men who have trained themselves to function on little. He sat in that back study with his phone and his silence and the specific focused energy of a man who has already decided what he is going to do and is simply waiting for the world to catch up to his decision. By 4 a.m, Vincent had sent him 3 files. Photos, locations, fragments of communication pulled from sources that did not officially exist. Dominic read through all of it without moving from the chair. By 5, he had made 4 more calls, 2 to men in this city, 1 to a man in another city entirely, and 1 to a number that took 7 rings to answer and connected him to a voice that sounded like it hadn't been disturbed in years and was not pleased to have that streak ended. By 6:15, he had a partial picture. The Galvani family had not simply returned to the city. They had been building something here for the better part of 2 months, slowly, quietly, the way a fire builds inside a wall before anyone smells smoke. Property acquisitions through shell companies. Conversations with people who had small loyalties and large debts. The kind of groundwork that took patience and a certain kind of arrogance. The arrogance of people who believed they had been let back in because they had found a door that wasn't being watched. They hadn't found a door. Someone had opened one for them. That was the part that sat in Dominic's chest like something he could not digest. At 6:40, his phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. 4 words, I have something, now. He called him immediately. Talk, Dominic said. I pulled the access logs on Elena's schedule system, Vincent said. His voice had the tight, controlled quality of a man delivering information he knows is going to land badly. Her calendar, her route preferences, her standard departure times, all of it is managed through the internal operations server. Standard stuff, nothing unusual about any of it. He paused. Except there were 3 external queries on her personal profile in the last 10 days. Same access point each time. Different hours, but same digital signature. Dominic waited. The access point traces back to an internal terminal, Vincent said. Conference room B, 3rd floor. Dominic said nothing. That terminal is keyed to a specific user login, Vincent continued. I double-checked it twice before I called you, because I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure I wasn't wrong. Another pause, shorter than the first. It's Marcus, sir, your driver. The name sat in the air like something that had just fallen from a great height and hadn't finished breaking yet. Marcus, who had driven him for 11 years, who had been at the hospital waiting room the night Dominic's father died, who knew every route, every property, every schedule, every face that came and went through Dominic's world with the particular intimacy of someone who sits behind the wheel while everything important happens in the back seat. Are you certain, Dominic said. Not a question, more like a man pressing his thumb against a wound to see how deep it was. Yes, sir. Vincent's voice was quiet. I'm certain. Dominic stood up from the chair. He walked to the window. He put one hand flat against the wall beside the frame and stood there breathing with deliberate slowness. 11 years. Marcus had worked for him for 11 years. Where is he right now? Dominic asked. His apartment. I've had eyes on him since 4 a.m. I pulled the log discrepancy around 3:30, and I wasn't going to come to you without being sure, so I put someone on him quietly while I verified. He doesn't know he's being watched. Keep it that way, Dominic said. Nobody moves on him. Nobody speaks to him. Nothing changes in how this morning runs. He paused. What time does he usually report for duty? 7:30? Dominic looked at his watch. 43 minutes. I want him to arrive as normal, Dominic said. I want everything to look exactly as it always looks. Can you manage that? Yes. Good. He lowered his hand from the wall. And Vincent, this conversation is between you and me and nobody else. Not a single person in the building. Understood? Understood, Vincent said, and ended the call. Dominic stood in the quiet of the room and let himself feel it for exactly 30 seconds, the specific pain of betrayal from someone you had trusted without thinking about it, because trust, by a certain point, becomes invisible. You stop seeing it, you stop checking it. You assume it is simply there the way you assume the floor will hold when you step on it. And then one day it doesn't, and the falling is almost less terrible than the moment just before that instant of understanding where the floor used to be. 30 seconds. Then he put it away. He had work to do. He went upstairs. He knocked once on Elena's door lightly. A beat of silence, then her voice. I'm awake. I need 20 minutes, he said through the door. Then I need you. Another beat. Give me 10, she said. She came downstairs in borrowed clothes, something Kara had found for her dark trousers, and a simple gray top that fit well enough with her hair pulled back the way she wore it at the office, and her face carrying the particular expression of someone who had slept badly and chosen not to make a point of it. She accepted the coffee that Kara handed her with a quiet nod, wrapped both hands around the mug, and looked at Dominic. You found something, she said. Yes. Is it bad? Define bad. She looked at him steadily. Is it the kind of bad where you're going to tell me to stay in this house and stay out of it? I haven't decided yet, he said honestly. She sat down across from him at the kitchen table and set her mug down and folded her hands in a way that said she was prepared to receive whatever he had. He had seen her do that in meetings, that deliberate, composed settling of herself, that signal that she was ready. He had always found it impressive. Right now it made something complicated move through him. He told her about Marcus. He watched her face as he said it, not intrusively, just paying attention the way he paid attention to everything that mattered. He saw the recognition land. He saw the brief flicker of something that might have been shock, except that Elena processed things too quickly for shock to stay long. By the time he finished, she was already somewhere further along in the sequence of implications. He knew my schedule because he drives you, she said quietly. He's heard every conversation, every change of plan, he's been in the building for years. He knows the layout, the systems, the people. She looked at Dominic. How long has he been feeding them information? At least the past 10 days based on what we found. Possibly longer. We're still pulling. 10 days. She calculated something. That's around when you started the Hargrove negotiations. Dominic went still. Say that again. The Hargrove acquisition talks. You started preliminary conversations about 10 days ago. I set up the secure calendar entries for the first meetings. She paused, watching his face. Those entries were on the same server system as my schedule. He stared at her. She was right. She was absolutely, completely right, and he had been so focused on what had happened to her last night that he had not yet drawn the line forward to the larger target. The Hargrove acquisition wasn't a simple business transaction. It involved 3 separate properties in the Port District, 2 of which had been the source of a quiet territorial dispute for the better part of a decade. Control of those properties meant control of a significant piece of how goods move through this city. The Galvani family had wanted that position for years and never been able to take it. But if they had access to the negotiation schedule, if they knew who he was meeting with when, and in what sequence, they didn't need to take it. They could simply maneuver him out of the position before the deal closed. Last night wasn't a warning about Elena. Last night was the Galvani family telling him, "We are inside your operation. We know what you are building, and we will take it apart piece by piece unless you stand down." Elena was watching him work through it. She didn't fill the silence. She waited. "The Hargrove meetings," he said slowly. "Did you back up the schedules anywhere outside the main system? Personal device, external drive? Anything?" "No, I keep everything on the secure server per protocol." She paused. "But Dominic, if Marcus has had access for 10 days, they already have the meeting schedule. All of it, including Thursday." Thursday, 3 days from now, the most important single meeting in the entire sequence. "We need to move Thursday," he said. "Moving Thursday at this point will signal that we know we're compromised," she said immediately. "They'll pull Marcus before you can use him." He looked at her. "If you want Marcus to lead you to whoever he's reporting to," she continued, "you can't let him know that you know, which means Thursday needs to happen. It just needs to happen differently than what he has on record." There was a beat of silence. "You're telling me to run a false schedule," he said. "I'm telling you that Marcus knows the schedule he found in the system," she said. "So you put a different schedule in the system, one that looks real, one with enough detail to be convincing, and you run the actual Thursday meeting somewhere he can't anticipate." She held his gaze. "Let him tell them what he thinks is happening. Let them prepare for the wrong thing." Dominic leaned back slowly. He was looking at her with an expression he was not entirely controlling, something between professional assessment and something considerably less professional. "When did you start thinking like this?" he asked. "I've always thought like this," she said simply. "You just usually only see the organized calendar version of it." Something shifted in the air between them. He looked away, first a deliberate choice, and reached for his own coffee. "There's a problem with that plan," he said. "Marcus can't know I'm involved in changing the schedule," she said, already there before him. "If he finds out I'm here, he'll know something's wrong, which means I need to get back to the office this morning at my normal time and act completely normal." "That's not happening," he said flatly. "Dominic, Elena," he set the coffee down. "These people put a man in front of your car last night. I am not sending you back into a building where someone is actively feeding your whereabouts to them. You just said we can't let Marcus know we found him, which I will handle without using you as bait." "I'm not suggesting I be bait," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. "I'm suggesting that the most logical way to feed Marcus false information is through the calendar system, and the only person whose access to that system won't raise questions is me." She paused. "If someone else suddenly starts updating my calendar entries, Marcus will notice. He's been watching it long enough to know the pattern." He knew she was right. He hated that she was right. He looked at her for a long moment, measuring something, the risk against the logic against the thing in his chest that had been sitting there since 2 a.m. and had no business being part of this conversation. "You stay on site at the office," he said finally. "You do not leave the building alone. You do not take any meetings outside. Vincent will be in the building placed somewhere Marcus can't connect to you." And he paused. "You check in with me every 2 hours. She didn't blink. "Every 2 hours is excessive." "Every 2 hours or you don't go," he said. The tone was final in a way that left no reasonable surface to push against. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she picked up her coffee. "Every 2 hours," she agreed. Marcus arrived at 7:30 on the dot, the same way he had arrived every morning for 11 years. Reliable, unhurried, with that easy manner of a man who is comfortable in his role. He greeted the building staff the way he always did. He checked the vehicle. He sent Dominic the standard "ready when you are" text at 7:32. Dominic replied at 7:47, change of plans. "Taking my own car today. Take the morning." He watched from a position where he could not be seen as Marcus read the message. Watched the slight stillness that passed through him, just a fraction of a second, barely visible, the stillness of a man recalibrating. Then Marcus typed back, "Copy that. Let me know if you need anything." Casual. Easy. 11 years of practice. Dominic turned away. Something that had once been warmth had finished cooling into something else entirely, and there was nothing to be done about it except note the temperature change and move forward. At 9 a.m., he received a call from Arthur. "Galvani's local contact in the city is a man named Reston," Arthur said without preamble. Carlo Reston. He's been operating under a consulting firm registration for the last 8 months. Clean paper trail, nothing operational on the surface. He's been the go-between for the family's local business. Reston, Dominic said. I don't know that name. You wouldn't. He came up from Miami 18 months ago. No prior connection to anyone in your circle. Arthur paused, and in the pause was the weight of something being prepared carefully. But he has a connection to someone adjacent to your circle. Dominic waited. He went to university with a man named Daniel Heist, Arthur said. The name hit like a fist to the sternum. Daniel Heist was not just a name in Dominic's world. Daniel Heist was the primary financial architect for the Hargrove acquisition. He was the man who knew not just the schedule, but the terms, the numbers, the pressure points and vulnerabilities, and the precise sequence in which the deal needed to move to hold together. He had been brought in 6 weeks ago at the recommendation of a mutual colleague whose judgment Dominic had never previously had reason to question. 6 weeks ago, the same window in which the Galvani family had come back into the city. Arthur, Dominic said, his voice dropping to a register that his inner circle would have recognized immediately, and none of them would have wanted to be on the wrong end of. Are you telling me that the man I brought in to structure my most sensitive acquisition is a personal contact of the Galvani family's local operator? I'm telling you they knew each other in university, Arthur said carefully. I cannot yet tell you the nature of their current relationship. Find out. 2 words, each one its own sentence. I will. A pause. Dominic. If Heist is compromised, the entire Hargrove deal structure is exposed. Every number, every contingency, every alternative position you hold. They wouldn't just be able to block the acquisition. They could take it. I know, Dominic said. Then you understand why I'm saying carefully, respectfully, as someone who has known you a long time, you may be more exposed right now than you have ever been. Yes, Dominic said, I do understand that. He ended the call. He sat with that for exactly as long as it took him to understand the full shape of it. Marcus feeding Elena's schedule to a man who reported to Galvani. Daniel Heist sitting at the center of the acquisition structure with full access to every number and position. And someone at the beginning of this chain who had placed Heist into the deal 6 weeks ago, right as the Galvani family was moving back into the city, right as the groundwork was being laid. This was not opportunistic. This was not reactive. This had been constructed. Someone had built this around him. Carefully, patiently, using people he trusted, layering pieces into place over weeks until the picture they were standing inside was one they had designed and he had simply walked into it. His phone buzzed. A text. Elena. Everything normal. Marcus is in the building. He came up to my office to say good morning. He asked if I'd had a good night. A pause then. He smiled at me, Dominic. He read it twice. He typed back, how are you? The reply came in under 10 seconds. Fine. I'm fine. Focus on what you're doing. He looked at those words for a long moment. The particular stubbornness in them, the refusal to be derailed, the woman who had been frightened on a dark street 6 hours ago and had somehow converted that fear into forward motion by morning. He typed, I need you to do something for me. What? Pull everything we have on Daniel Heist. Every document, every communication, every record of his access to the Hargrove files. Quietly, don't flag it in the system. Don't tell anyone you're looking. He paused, then added, and Elena trusts no one in that building right now. Not anyone. A longer pause this time, then including you. He stared at the message. He typed back slowly, especially me, until I've earned it. The reply took almost a full minute. When it came, it was 3 words. You already have. He set the phone down on the desk. He looked at the wall across from him without seeing it. There was something moving through him that was not strategy, not calculation, not the cold and structured machinery of a man managing a crisis. It was something older and less controllable than any of that. Something that had been building quietly for 3 years in the space between professional and personal, where he had never allowed himself to spend any real time. He did not have space for it right now. He picked the phone back up. He made the next call, and the call after that. And he kept moving because movement was the only language he had ever fully trusted, and because somewhere in a building on the other side of the city, Elena Marsh was sitting across from a man who had smiled at her this morning while knowing exactly what had been done to her last night, and that thought alone was enough to keep him burning through every hour between now and the moment he could make that right. The Galvani family had built this carefully. Dominic intended to take it apart the same way. He just needed 48 hours he wasn't sure he had. The heist files came through at 11:14. Elena had pulled them cleanly without flagging the system, without leaving a trace that would read as unusual to anyone monitoring access patterns. She had simply done what she always did, moved through the architecture of the operation with the quiet efficiency of someone who had built half of it herself and sent him a compressed folder with a single line of text attached. "You're not going to like this." She was right. Daniel Heist had joined the Hargrove project 6 weeks ago, brought in through a referral from a man named Graham Cole, a senior broker Dominic had worked with twice over the past 4 years. Both times without incident, both times with results professional enough that he had filed Cole in the category of reliable and moved on. He had not looked too closely at the referral. Why would he? Cole had a solid record. Heist had the right credentials. The timing had seemed like good fortune. It had not been good fortune. Inside the heist files, buried under 3 layers of legitimate documentation, Elena had found something she'd flagged in red at the top of the folder, a property registration from 14 months ago. A small commercial holding in the Port District registered under a numbered company with no visible ownership trail. Standard enough except that when you cross-reference the numbered company's registered address against the incorporation records Arthur had sent on Carlo Reston's consulting firm, they shared the same administrative agent. Different companies, different names, same back-office handler. Heist and Reston were not just university acquaintances. They were financially entangled. Had been for over a year. Dominic read through it twice, standing in the study, not sitting, because sitting felt like something a man did when he wasn't about to do anything, and he was very much about to do something. He called Elena. She picked up on the first ring, which meant she had been waiting. "You saw it," she said. "I saw it," he said. "The property registration puts them together before the Hargrove deal even existed," she said. Her voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge underneath it, the specific edge of someone who is angry and is managing it very precisely. Which means Heist wasn't brought in because of Cole's referral. Heist was already positioned. Cole was just the mechanism for getting him in front of you. Which means Cole is either compromised or he was used without knowing it, Dominic said. "I've been thinking about that," Elena said. "Cole has no history with anyone connected to Galvani. Unchecked everything we have on him going back 5 years. Nothing connects. I think he was used. Someone fed him the Heist introduction through a channel that would look clean, and Cole passed it along in good faith." "Agreed," Dominic said. "Which means Cole stays out of this. I don't want him spooked or warned. If Heist notices any shift in Cole's behavior, we lose the element of surprise." "There's something else," Elena said, and her voice shifted slightly. Not hesitant, but careful in the way she was careful when she was about to say something she knew would land hard. "I cross-checked Heist's access log against the Hargrove files. He's been accessing the deal documents on a schedule that doesn't line up with his work needs. Off hours pulls weekend access documents he has no structural reason to open." A pause. "He pulled the Thursday meeting parameters 4 days ago, location, attendees, the negotiation sequence we'd planned." Dominic was quiet for a moment. All of it, she confirmed, including the reserve position. The number we were going to hold back until the final stage. The reserve position was the piece no one was supposed to see coming. It was the margin that made the deal survivable. If the first round of negotiations pushed back hard, the cushion built into the structure that gave Dominic room to move without losing ground. If the Galvani family's people knew the reserve position, they didn't just know what he was going to offer. They knew the ceiling. They knew exactly how far he could go before the deal stopped making sense, and they could position their interference at precisely that threshold. It was elegant in the way that good sabotage is always elegant. You don't need to destroy something when you know exactly where the hairline fracture is. "Elena," he said. "Yes. I need you to build me a new reserve position. Different numbers, different structure, different sequence. Something that looks like the real thing if Heist pulls it, but it leads them to the wrong ceiling." He paused. "Can you do that without Heist's access touching it?" She was quiet for exactly 3 seconds, the length of time it took her to build it in her head. Yes, she said. I'll need to create a shadow document outside the main system and then manually migrate specific pieces back in. It'll look like a routine update if anyone's watching. I can have it done by 2. Good, he paused. And Elena, when you're done, I need you to do one more thing. What? I need you to call Heist directly. Tell him there has been a change to Thursday's preparation materials and you're sending him an updated summary. Send him the false version. A beat of silence. You want me to be the one who hands it to him, she said. I want it to come from the most credible source, he said. If it comes from you, he doesn't question it. You're the person who manages everything. It's natural. And if he asks me something, probes to see if anything's wrong, then you'll handle it, Dominic said. The same way you've handled everything else in the last 12 hours. She didn't respond to that directly. He heard the brief silence of the intake of breath. All right, she said. I'll call him at 1:30. Call me after. Every 2 hours, she said with something very close to dry in her voice. I know. At 12:40, Marcus texted him again. Going to grab lunch. Back by 2. Anything you need before I go? Dominic stared at the message. 11 years. The man had driven him through 3 cities, 2 funerals, and 1 night that Dominic had never fully described to anyone. He had sat behind the wheel, quiet and steady and utterly reliable, and Dominic had given him access to the fullest visible layer of his life without a second thought. He typed back, all good. Enjoy lunch. He set the phone face down on the desk. He put both hands flat on the surface and breathed slowly through the weight of it. Vincent called 3 minutes later. He's moving, Vincent said. On foot, heading east on Canning. Stay on him, Dominic said. I want to know who he meets. Understood. There's something else. Vincent's voice tightened almost imperceptibly. He made a call from his personal phone 6 minutes before he texted you. 3-minute call. We pulled the number. It's a burner registered to nothing but the cell tower. It pinged off of, puts it within 4 blocks of Carlo Reston's consulting office. Dominic said nothing. He's reporting your morning movements, Vincent said quietly. He knows you didn't take the car today. He's telling them something changed. Let him tell them, Dominic said. As long as he doesn't know why it changed, it gives them something to work with that goes nowhere. He paused. Keep the tail light. I don't want him spooked. Copy. He ended the call and stood in the quiet of the room and felt the shape of the next 36 hours the way you feel weather coming, not with your eyes, but with something below the surface of the skin. The false Thursday schedule was being built. Heist was about to receive information that would send the Galvani family's preparations in the wrong direction. Marcus was being watched without knowing it. And somewhere in this structure, somewhere between the moving pieces and the false trails, there was still the original question he had not yet answered. Who had placed Graham Cole in the path of the Heist introduction? Someone had engineered that referral. Someone had needed Heist inside the deal and had found the exact right pressure point to use Cole's professional network, Cole's credibility, Cole's habit of making good faith introductions to men he believed were trustworthy. Someone had worked backward from the result they wanted and built the mechanism with a level of precision that suggested they had known Dominic's inner circle well enough to map it. That was not a Galvani family competency. The Galvani family was powerful, but they were not known for intricate structural manipulation. They were known for force, for direct application of pressure, for the blunt instrument approach. What Dominic was looking at right now had a different fingerprint, subtler, more patient, the fingerprint of someone who had spent real time inside his world before deciding to use it against him. His phone rang, unknown number. He almost let it go. Something made him answer. Mr. Rourke? The voice on the other end was male, middle-aged, with the unhurried cadence of someone who was not afraid of the person they'd called. I appreciate you picking up. Who is this? Dominic said. My name is Reston, the man said. Carlo Reston. I think you've been learning about me this morning, so I thought it might save us both some time if I simply called. The audacity of it landed like a slap. Dominic kept his voice completely even. That's a bold choice, Mr. Reston. I'm a practical man, Reston said. Bold and practical aren't always different things. A brief pause. I'm not calling to threaten you. I want to be clear about that. The event last night, the interaction with your assistant, that was a communication, not an action. The distinction matters. Does it? Dominic said. It does to the people I represent, Reston said. They want you to understand that this is a business conversation, not a war. They are not interested in a war with you, Mr. Rourke. They are interested in a reasonable arrangement regarding the Hargrove properties, specifically a shared position, not an acquisition that eliminates their access to the Port District entirely. Dominic was quiet for a moment. He was recording the call. Vincent had the number flagged already. He could see the notification on his second phone. So your approach to opening a business conversation, he said, was to follow my assistant's car at midnight, put a man at her window, and tell her my clock was running out. As I said, Reston replied, without a trace of apology, a communication, an illustration of proximity. No one was harmed. She was frightened, Dominic said. The words came out quieter than everything else he'd said, which somehow made them heavier. A fractional pause. That was regrettable, Reston said. Is it? Dominic said. Mr. Rourke, I'm going to tell you something, Mr. Reston, and I want you to listen to it carefully and carry it back accurately. Dominic kept his voice even low and entirely without heat, because heat was for men who needed to convince people they were serious, and he did not need to convince anyone of anything. I don't negotiate from fear. I don't respond to pressure tactics, and I do not share positions with people who make themselves relevant by frightening women on dark streets. If the family you represent wants a conversation about the Port District, they can find a channel that doesn't involve my people. And if they come near anyone connected to me again, anyone, the conversation ends permanently. He paused. Do you have all of that? A longer pause this time. I have it, Reston said carefully. Good. Dominic ended the call. He immediately called Vincent. Reston just called me directly from a number we should be able to trace now. Get me everything, location of the call, any properties connected to his firm within a quarter mile of that tower. I want an address by 3 p.m. On it, Vincent said. At 1:40, Elena called. I spoke to Heist, she said, and her voice had that flat post-adrenaline quality of someone who had just carried off something difficult and was not finished processing it. How did it go? He asked 3 questions, she said. The first 2 were professional standard clarifications about the document I sent. The third wasn't. Dominic waited. He asked me if there was any change to the location for Thursday, she said. Not the agenda, not the attendees, specifically the location. I told him no, same venue as scheduled. A pause. He already knew the original location, Dominic. He wouldn't have asked about the location unless someone told him the location was what to watch for. They're planning something at the venue, Dominic said immediately. That's what I think, she said. I don't know what, but asking about location specifically, that's not a casual question. That's a man checking whether the piece he's watching is still in place. Dominic's mind moved quickly through it. An interference at the venue, what did that mean? Not violence necessarily. The Galvani family's play here was financial, not physical. More likely a third party, someone positioned at the venue who could observe the meeting, intercept communications, potentially approach one of the Hargrove representatives directly with a competing offer. If they knew the timing and the location and the negotiation ceiling, because Heist had given them all of it, they could have a competing conversation happening on the same day in proximity with enough information to undercut Dominic's position before he'd fully made it. We moved the venue, he said. I already did, Elena said. He stopped. What? After I got off the call with Heist, I contacted the Hargrove team, directly used the secondary channel you set up at the start of the process, the one that doesn't run through our main communication system. I told them there was a security consideration and we needed to shift the Thursday meeting to an alternate location. I gave them the address of the Ashford Lane property. A beat. I didn't tell them why. I just told them it came from you. He was completely still. I know you didn't authorize that, she said, and her voice was steady, but there was something slightly careful in it, not defensive, but honest. If you want me to walk it back, I can. But if Heist tells them the original venue is still active, they'll position for a location that's going to be empty. And Thursday happens somewhere they don't know about. The silence stretched for several seconds. You moved the meeting, he said slowly, to my property. To a property they don't know exists, she said. Yes. Elena. He stopped. He didn't know exactly what he was going to say after her name, which almost never happened. You should have called me first. I know, she said. But Heist would have pulled the communication if it sat in the system for the 20 minutes it would have taken me to reach you and get authorization. The window was about 4 minutes. She paused. I made a call. He thought about telling her that making calls of that magnitude without authorization was not her role. He thought about it for exactly as long as it took him to understand that the call she had made was correct, was fast, and had possibly just saved the most important negotiation of the year. Then he let the thought go. Tell me you backed up the Hargrove team's confirmation outside the main system, he said. Encrypted personal device, she said, mumming accessible from inside the building. Good, he exhaled slowly. Good. Are you angry? She asked. No, he said. It came out entirely honest, which surprised him slightly. You sound like you're deciding whether to be. I'm deciding whether I should be, he said, which is different. A pause. You made the right call. Don't do it again without telling me. I'll try, she said, which was not a promise, and they both knew it, and somehow that was exactly right. Vincent's address came through at 2:58. Reston's call had traced to a building in the financial district, a property registered to a holding company that when Vincent pulled the trail linked back through 4 layers of incorporation to a name that stopped Dominic cold. Not Galvani, not Reston, not anyone from outside his world. The name at the end of the trail was Thomas Wren. Thomas Wren, who had been Dominic's silent financial partner for the better part of 7 years. Thomas Wren, who had a quiet stake in 12 of Dominic's holdings and knew the structural logic of his entire operation from the inside out. Thomas Wren, who had been the one to suggest 6 weeks ago over dinner in a conversation that had seemed entirely casual that Graham Cole might be the right person to bring in for the Hargrove deal's financial architecture. Thomas Wren had given him Cole. Cole had given him Heist. Heist had given the Galvani family everything they needed. And Wren had been running it from the beginning, not from outside the walls, not through a discovered vulnerability, but from a seat at Dominic's own table with a smile across a dinner table and a recommendation made in the tone of someone doing a favor. Dominic set his phone down very carefully on the desk. He sat in the silence for a long time. 7 years. This was not Marcus's 11 years. This was different. This was a man who had not just been trusted, but had been given real access to real money and real structure, who had eaten at his table and been introduced to people who mattered and been folded into the fabric of the operation, not as staff, but as a partner. His phone buzzed. Elena, you've gone quiet. Check-in time. A pause, then Dominic, what happened? He picked up the phone. He looked at her words. He typed, I know who built this. All of it. He paused, then added, it's worse than Marcus. The reply came in seconds. Tell me. He typed the name. Her response took longer than usual, long enough that he found himself watching the screen in a way that was not entirely rational. Then Thomas Wren has a 17% stake in 4 of the Hargrove district properties. I just pulled his registration history. He's been positioned to block this acquisition from before we even started. Of course he had, of course. A 17% stake that would be diluted to nothing if the Hargrove deal completed on Dominic's terms. Wren hadn't built this network of interference out of loyalty to the Galvani family. He'd built it out of pure financial self-preservation to stop a deal that would cost him a significant piece of what he'd spent 7 years quietly accumulating. He had used Galvani as the weapon and dressed it up as someone else's war. He's been with you 7 years, Elena wrote. He knew exactly how you'd respond to an outside threat. He knew you'd focus on Galvani and not look for a hand closer to home. Dominic read it and felt the particular cold clarity that came when the full shape of something finally became visible. Not warm, not satisfying, just absolutely completely clear. He had been looking at the wrong enemy. The man who had sent someone to Elena's car window, who had fed his schedule to outside operators, who had put her on that dark street at midnight. It wasn't the Galvani family following old territorial ambitions. It was Thomas Wren protecting a financial position using fear and chaos, and a woman who deserved none of it as instruments. His phone rang. Unknown number again. He answered. Mr. Rourke. Not Reston this time. Older voice, the voice of a man who was used to being at the top of things. I think you've had a rather informative afternoon. Dominic said nothing for 3 full seconds. Thomas, he said finally, very quietly. The name landed on the line like a stone dropped into still water. And then Thomas Wren, who had been his partner for 7 years and had spent the last 6 weeks trying to destroy him from the inside, said, I think it's time we had dinner. Dinner, Dominic repeated, not a question, not an acceptance, just the word repeated back the way you repeat something when you need a second to decide whether the person who said it is brave or simply has no accurate understanding of where they stand. Tonight, Wren said, Meridian Club, 8 o'clock. Private dining the back room, you know the one. We've sat there before, you and I. A pause. I think a face-to-face conversation would be more productive than whatever you're currently building toward. Dominic leaned back slowly. He kept his voice completely flat. You think I'm going to be across a table from you. I think you're a practical man, Wren said, which means you already understand that burning this down doesn't get you what you want. You want the Hargrove deal. You want the Port District properties. You want Thursday to close cleanly. A brief pause, the calculated kind timed for effect. None of that happens if this escalates, and you know that. He was right. That was the part that sat like glass in the throat. Thomas Wren was not wrong. A direct confrontation, a public unraveling of the financial entanglement, a war fought on the level of law and money and leverage would take months, would cost more than the deal was worth, and would leave enough collateral damage across Dominic's other holdings that the Galvani family could walk into the resulting chaos and help themselves. Wren had structured his position to make the clean option expensive and the messy option catastrophic. 7 years. The man had spent 7 years learning exactly how Dominic thought. 8 o'clock, Dominic said. 8 o'clock, Wren confirmed. The warmth in his voice was obscene. I'll see you there. The line went dead. Dominic sat with the phone in his hand for a long moment. Then he called Elena. She answered before the first ring finished. I heard it in your voice before you left the building this morning, she said without greeting. And I'm hearing it now. What did he say? He wants dinner. Tonight. Meridian Club, 8 p.m. Silence, then, he invited you to dinner. Yes. The man who spent 6 weeks building a network to destroy your most important deal and put one of his people at my car window at midnight, he called you to schedule dinner. Yes. And you said, I said 8 o'clock. A longer silence. Dominic. He's not wrong that escalating directly costs more than it recovers, he said, and he knows I know that. He called because he believes he still has enough leverage to negotiate his way out of this and keep a position at the table. He paused. I want to hear what he thinks that offer looks like. Or he wants you at a location he controls at a time he's set in circumstances where the people he's been working with for the last 6 weeks know exactly where you'll be. Her voice was calm, but the edge underneath it was sharp. That's also a possibility. He had already considered that. The Galvani family doesn't want a direct confrontation with me, he said. Reston's call made that clear. They want a financial arrangement. Wren knows that. Tonight isn't a trap, it's Wren trying to reposition before I take his 17% stake apart in court. You sound very confident about that. I'm moderately confident about that, he said honestly. Moderately. Her voice went flat in a way that meant she was not reassured. That's less confident than I would like you to be before walking into a room with someone who just spent 6 weeks trying to ruin you. Elena, don't say my name in that tone. I know what it means and it doesn't work as well as you think it does. Something moved through him, something almost like warmth, which was remarkable given everything happening around it. I need you to pull Wren's full position, he said, redirecting. Every holding, every stake, every financial instrument he has connected to any of our joint ventures. I need the complete picture before 8. I started pulling it when you texted me his name, she said. I'll have it by 5. Of course she had. Of course she was already ahead of it. He almost said something about that, about the specific quality of relief that came from knowing she was always one step ahead of what he needed, but he kept it where it was. Good, he said. And Elena, after 5, I need you out of the office. Go back to Ashford Lane. Don't go home. A beat. You think Wren would move against me again? I think Wren is running out of options, and men with no options make decisions that surprise even themselves. His voice was measured, deliberate. I'm not taking the chance. She was quiet for a moment, not reluctant thinking. All right, she said, 5 o'clock. Then, be careful tonight, I mean it. I know you do, he said. He called Vincent immediately after. I need the Meridian Club covered tonight, he said. Not visible. I want 2 people inside before 6 staff positions. If you can arrange it or guest with reservations near the back room. I want to know if anyone enters or leaves through a secondary exit. I want a car on Reston from 5 p.m. forward. If he moves toward the club, I want to know in real time. He paused. And pull Marcus in. Tonight. Don't make it feel like anything other than a normal request. Tell him I need him for a late pickup. Give him a time and a location that brings him somewhere contained. I want him in a room where I can speak to him directly before midnight. You're going to confront Marcus tonight, Vincent said carefully. I'm going to give Marcus a choice, Dominic said. There's a difference. Vincent understood, as he always did, the distinction between those 2 things and what each of them required. I'll set it up, he said. 7 p.m. for Marcus. I'll tell him it's an airport run. Good. And the dinner with Ren, you want me there? No, Dominic said. Ren will be watching for backup. If he sees anyone connected to me in that room, the conversation ends before it starts, and I need it to have a beginning. He paused. I'll be wearing a wire. You'll hear everything in real time. Copy, Vincent said. Then, with the particular careful tone of a man who rarely said more than was necessary, watch yourself with him. He didn't get to 7 years at your table by being readable. I know, Dominic said. Elena's file arrived at 4:47. It was comprehensive, detailed, and entirely damning. Ren's 17% stake in the 4 Hargrove District properties was only the beginning. He had 7 additional positions across various Dominic-adjacent holdings, some direct, some buried under layers of corporate structure that had been designed to look incidental. The total picture was of a man who had been very quietly and very patiently building a parallel financial stake inside the same geography as Dominic's operation. Not competing directly. Nesting. Positioning himself in the margins of every significant deal in a way that meant Dominic's success was Ren's success right up until the Hargrove acquisition, which would consolidate and restructure the Port District in a way that collapsed those margins entirely. Ren wasn't trying to destroy Dominic. He was trying to survive a deal that would accidentally erase him, which made him more dangerous, not less. Desperation with resources was a specific kind of problem. There was a note at the bottom of Elena's file added after the main document. He's not acting out of ambition. He's acting out of fear. People who are afraid make deals, but they also make mistakes. Watch which one he leads with tonight. Dominic read it twice. He sent back, "Well, you should have been doing this job 10 years ago." Her reply came in under a minute. "You weren't in it 10 years ago. Now go get ready and eat something before you go. You haven't eaten today." He looked at the message for a moment, then he went and ate something. Yeah. Marcus arrived at the warehouse property on Clement Street at 7:03, which was exactly when Vincent had told him to be there. He walked in with the easy familiarity of a man who had been in 100 of Dominic's properties and seen nothing in any of them that had ever given him reason for concern. He was carrying his car keys loosely in his right-hand jacket, open the whole posture of someone running a routine errand. He stopped when he saw Dominic. Just that. A stop. The keys went still in his hand. "Sit down, Marcus," Dominic said. Marcus did not sit down immediately. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at Dominic with an expression that moved through several stages, very quickly surprise, assessment, and then something underneath both of them that was older and sadder and more honest. "You know," Marcus said. It wasn't a question either. "Sit down," Dominic said again. Not hard, not threatening, just final. Marcus sat. Dominic stood across from him and looked at the man he had trusted for 11 years, the face he'd seen every morning for a decade through a rear-view mirror, the voice that had said wherever you need to go, more times than he could count. "How long?" Dominic asked. Marcus looked at the floor briefly, then back up. 8 months, he said. "Reston." "Yes." "How did he reach you?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. His hands were clasped between his knees, and there was a particular quality to his stillness. Not defiant, not calculating, just the stillness of a man who has been carrying something heavy for 8 months and has finally set it down. "My daughter," he said. "She had medical debt. Significant. I was managing it. I thought I was managing it. But 8 months ago, I got behind and the collectors were... It was bad, Dominic. It was really bad. He stopped. Reston found me. I don't know how he knew, but he knew. He offered to cover everything. All of it. One payment. He said all he needed was information. Schedules. Routes. Nothing that would get anyone hurt. You gave him Elena's schedule, Dominic said. The name landed on Marcus visibly. Something in his face shifted a flinch, quick controlled, but real. He told me she just needed to receive a message, that nobody would touch her, that it was a business communication. She was alone on Caldwell Alley at midnight with a strange man at her window, Dominic said quietly. Marcus closed his eyes. He kept them closed for a long moment. When he opened them, there was something in his expression that had the look of a man confronting a version of himself he could not make peace with. I know, he said. I know what happened. I've been since that night He stopped, started again. Is she all right? She's all right, Dominic said. Marcus nodded slowly. The relief in it was genuine, unmistakably, completely genuine, and that made it both better and worse. I'm going to ask you one question, Dominic said, and I need the truth. Not the managed version, not the version that protects you. The truth. Marcus looked at him directly. Okay. Did you know Ren was behind Reston when you agreed to work with him? The silence was 3 seconds long. Dominic counted them. No, Marcus said. I knew Reston. I knew who he represented at the level I was told a business group with Port District interests. I didn't know about Ren until 2 weeks ago. He paused. Reston let it slip. I don't think he meant to. After that, I pulled back on the information I was passing. The Thursday schedule, the heist files, I gave Reston partial information. I told him the Thursday venue was still the original location even after I'd already seen the update that said it might change. Dominic went very still. You gave them the wrong venue. Yes. Deliberately. Yes. Marcus's voice was low, stripped of everything except the plain fact. I couldn't undo what I'd already done, but I could make what I gave him going forward less useful. Dominic looked at him for a long time. He thought about what it cost a man to carry 8 months of this, the daily performance of normal, while feeding selected pieces to the wrong side, and then the slow, terrible adjustment when the wrong side turned out to have a name he recognized. Your daughter, he said. What's her name? Marcus blinked. The shift in direction seemed to disarm him more than anything else had. Lily, he said. How old? 26. What does she do? She's a nurse. A trace of something quiet and proud in the word despite everything. Dominic nodded slowly. He moved to the chair across from Marcus and sat down, an equalizing gesture, a removal of the particular power that came from standing over a seated man. Here is what's going to happen, he said. You are going to give Vincent a complete accounting of everything you passed to Reston. Every piece of information, every date, every detail, all of it. You leave nothing out. Marcus nodded. And then you are going to go home, and you are going to stay available, and you are going to wait to hear from me. He paused. Lily's debt is handled. Tonight. Marcus stared at him. I'm not doing it for you, Dominic said plainly. I'm doing it because she didn't make your choice, and she shouldn't pay for them. That's all. Marcus's jaw worked silently for a moment. When he found his voice, it came out rough at the edges. Why, he managed. After everything, because you tried to correct it, Dominic said. Imperfectly. Too late. But you tried. He stood. That counts for something. It doesn't count for everything. But it counts. He left Marcus with Vincent and walked back to his car. The Meridian Club at 8 p.m. was everything it always was: quiet wealth, and old wood, and the particular hush of a space designed for conversations that would never appear in any official record. The host took his coat without being asked and led him through the main room toward the private dining corridor without being directed, because Dominic had been here enough times that the staff knew the path. Ren was already seated. He looked exactly the same as he always had. 61 years old, silver-haired, with the broad, comfortable face of a man who had spent his life being considered trustworthy and had found it an extremely useful thing to be. He stood when Dominic entered, extended his hand across the table the same way he had at every meeting, every dinner, every occasion over 7 years. Dominic looked at the hand, then he sat down. Ren sat too without acknowledging the unreturned handshake. He poured from the water glass as if the moment had not happened. Thank you for coming, he said. You said it would be productive, Dominic said. I believe it will be. Ren set the water glass down. He looked across the table with the steady, measured gaze of a man who had rehearsed this conversation and was now checking the room against the version in his head. I want you to understand something before we talk business. What happened to your assistant that was outside the parameters of what I authorized? Elena, Dominic said. Her name is Elena. A slight pause. What happened to Elena was outside what I authorized. I told Reston a communication needed to be delivered. The method he chose was a brief tightening around the eyes. It was excessive, and I want you to know that I told him so directly afterward. The casual obscenity of it, the management speak applied to a woman being frightened on a dark street, moved through Dominic like cold water through a crack. He kept his face completely still. I appreciate you clarifying that, he said in a tone that meant the opposite of what the words said. Ren heard it. He moved on. The Hargrove deal, he said. That's what this has always been about. You know my position. A full acquisition on your terms collapses my stake in those 4 properties. I'd be left holding paper that's worth a fraction of its current value. He paused. I'm not asking you to walk away from the deal. I'm asking for a restructured arrangement, a joint position. My 17% is formalized, protected, built into the deal structure rather than overwritten by it. You want me to reward the person who sabotaged my deal by giving them a permanent seat in it, Dominic said. I want us to continue a 7-year relationship in a form that works for both of us, Ren said smoothly. What I did was a miscalculation. I was protecting my position under pressure, and I chose methods that I would not choose today. But the underlying interest is legitimate. My stake in those properties is real. My claim to a seat at that table is real. Dominic looked at him. He let the silence sit for a moment, the way you let something breathe before you decide how to handle it. You're right that your position is real, Bino, he said finally. You're right that a direct confrontation would be expensive for both of us. He paused. And you're right that I came tonight because I thought a conversation was worth having. Ren's posture eased slightly, just slightly, the relaxation of a man who has been holding something tight and believes he's beginning to be heard. But here's what you got wrong, Thomas, Dominic continued, his voice dropping a register into something very quiet and very clear. You assumed that the Hargrove deal is still happening on Thursday. You assumed that Heist's information is still intact. You assumed that Reston is still a functional communication channel for you. He paused. And you assumed that I walked into this room tonight because I needed something from you. Ren's face had gone very still. I walked into this room tonight, Dominic said, because I wanted you to look me in the eye when you understood that every piece you moved in the last 6 weeks has been turned. He leaned forward slightly. Thursday's meeting is at a location you don't have. The financial parameters Heist passed to Reston are false, and Reston himself is having a conversation with federal contacts right now who have been very interested in his firm's incorporation history. He paused. Your 17% stake in those properties is going to be the subject of an injunction filing by end of business tomorrow based on documentation of the coordinated interference campaign, which means it's frozen, not gone frozen, unless this conversation goes somewhere that makes the filing unnecessary. The silence was complete. Ren's face had made a journey that it was trying to conceal and failing. Behind the composed silver-haired surface, something had cracked open, not collapsed, not broken, but fractured enough to show the underneath. You came to negotiate, Ren said quietly. Testing. I came to finalize, Dominic said. Those are different things. Negotiation implies both parties have open positions. My positions are closed. What I'm offering you is an exit that doesn't end with everything you've built in the last 7 years examined under lights you don't want turned on. He paused. You sell me your 17% stake at market value. Tonight, you sign a clean separation from every joint venture we hold. You stay away from Reston and every Galvani-connected entity from this point forward. And in exchange, the injunction filing doesn't happen. The federal conversation stays limited to Reston's own exposure, and you retain the rest of what you've built outside our shared holdings. Ren was very quiet. Or Dominic said, we continue to sit here and you explain to me why I should accept any less than that. The room held the particular silence of a man doing the mathematics of his own survival, and not finding a better equation. You'd let me walk, Ren said finally. After everything. I'm not letting you walk, Dominic said. I'm setting the terms of your exit. Those are not the same thing. He paused. And Thomas, this is the only version of tonight where you leave this room with your other holdings intact. I want you to understand that completely. Ren looked at him for a long moment. The composed warmth he'd walked in with was entirely gone. What was left was something more honest, a tired man in his 60s calculating the remains. I'll need my lawyer, Ren said. Your lawyer can review the documents, Dominic said. The documents are already drafted. Vincent will deliver them to your building tonight. You have until 6 a.m. to sign. He stood. Enjoy your dinner, Thomas. He walked out of the private room through the main dining area out into the quiet street and got into his car. He sat there for a moment without starting the engine. His phone buzzed. Vincent Wren's lawyer just called his office. He's asking for the documents. He texted back, send them. Then another buzz. Elena, how did it go? A pause then. And don't say fine. He looked at those words for a long moment. Then he typed, it went the way it needed to. Are you at Ashford? Yes, Kara made dinner. It's getting cold. A pause, then, are you coming back? He started the car. He typed yes. He pulled out onto the street and drove through the quiet city past the places where things had happened over the last 40 hours that he was not going to forget quickly. Past the geography of a crisis that had arrived through a 2 a.m. phone call and 3 words that hadn't finished being said. His phone buzzed one more time. Elena. I'll keep a plate warm. He drove faster. He arrived at Ashford Lane at 9:47. The security detail at the perimeter gave him a nod as he pulled in quiet, professional, the kind of acknowledgement that said everything was still in place and nothing had moved that wasn't supposed to. He cut the engine and sat in the car for exactly 30 seconds, doing nothing, which was something he almost never permitted himself. Just 30 seconds of stillness before walking back into whatever came next. The wire Vincent had fitted him with before dinner was still on. He pulled it free in the car, set it on the passenger seat, and got out. The house was quieter than the morning had been. Kara had left the kitchen light on and a covered plate on the counter with a folded note that said simply microwave 2 minutes in handwriting that suggested she had been doing this kind of thing for a long time and expected no particular thanks. He appreciated both the food and the lack of ceremony around it. He heard Elena before he saw her. She was in the small sitting room off the main hallway. He could hear the quiet movement of someone who was not asleep and was not trying to be. He set his coat on the hook by the door, the way he did at his own properties, without thinking about it, and went to find her. She was sitting with her legs folded under her on the end of the sofa, a legal pad on the cushion beside her, and a pen in her hand that she'd apparently been using until about 3 seconds before he appeared in the doorway, because she set it down with the specific casualness of someone pretending they hadn't just been working at 10 p.m. after the night they'd had. She looked at him. Her eyes moved over him the way they sometimes did in the office when he came back from something difficult, quickly, thoroughly taking inventory without making a production of it. You're in one piece, she said. Generally, he'd said. Ren signed. Not yet. He has until 6 a.m. He moved into the room and sat in the chair across from her. Not the sofa, not beside her, the chair, which put a reasonable professional distance between them and was a decision he made and was aware of making. He'll sign. He's too pragmatic not to. And Reston? Vincent's handling that conversation tonight. Reston has his own exposure to manage. He'll cooperate to limit it. He paused. The Galvani family will pull back. Without Ren's financial backing, and with Reston compromised, their position in this city is built on nothing. They're not irrational. They'll reassess. Elena nodded slowly, absorbing the shape of it. She had the legal pad on her lap now, and he could see, without reading it, that it was covered in her handwriting. Notes columns, the structured thinking she did on paper when the problem was too large for just her head. She had been working this whole time. While he was at dinner, while he was sitting in his car, in the dark, she had been here doing what she always did, building the structure, anticipating the next piece, staying one step ahead of everything, so that when he arrived, the ground was already solid. You need to eat, she said. I know. The plate on the counter. I saw it. Neither of them moved. Elena, he said. Don't, she said quietly. He paused. Don't what? Don't say whatever you're about to say in the voice you use when you're about to be careful with me. She looked at him directly. I've listened to you be careful for 3 years. I know the voice. Something moved across her face, not hardness, but a kind of clear-eyed steadiness that was entirely characteristic of her and entirely impossible to deflect. Just say it the real way. He looked at her for a moment. You shouldn't have had to go through any of this, he said. What happened on Caldwell Street, what happened in the office today, none of it was your situation to manage. It was mine. And it came to you because someone I trusted for 11 years made a decision that put you in the center of something you had no reason to be in. She was quiet listening, not filling the space with reassurance the way some people would have. I am sorry for that, he said, not as your employer, as the person responsible for it. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said finally, and I want you to hear something back. She uncurled her legs from the sofa and sat forward, slightly elbows on her knees, the posture she took when she was about to say something she'd decided to commit to. I'm not fragile. I don't need you to carry the weight of what happened to me on top of everything else. It was frightening. It was genuinely frightening, and the 48 hours since have been a lot. But I made it through it. I made decisions in it. Some of them were even good decisions. Most of them were good decisions, he said, the venue move. Among others. The corner of her mouth shifted, not quite a smile, but the direction of one. I'm saying I don't want you to look at me differently after this, she said. Like I'm something that needs to be protected from your world. I've been in your world for 3 years. I've known what it was for most of that time. I chose to stay. He held her gaze. White I'm better, he said. It came out quieter than he intended. She held his gaze back. You know why. The room was very quiet. This was the moment, the one that had been building under the surface of 3 years of careful professional distance, of deliberate focus on the work of two people who were fluent enough in each other to understand what was there without either of them having named it. He had kept it below the surface because he had genuinely believed that it was the right thing to do. Because she worked for him. Because his life was not the kind of life you invited someone into without being certain they understood every dimension of what that meant. Because certainty of that kind took time. 48 hours ago, he had gotten a phone call at 2 a.m. and had been out the door in 40 seconds, and somewhere in the wreckage of everything that followed, the last of the reasons had quietly stopped holding. His phone buzzed on the arm of the chair. He picked it up reflexively. Vincent Marcus completed the full accounting. Clean record of everything passed to Reston. Ready for your review. He typed back, tomorrow morning. Set the phone down. Go eat, Elena said. Her voice had shifted back to the register she used when she was giving him an instruction she expected to be followed. I'll still be here when you're done. Something in those last 6 words, the simple, unhurried certainty of them, landed in his chest and stayed. He went and ate. At 11:15, Vincent called. Ren's lawyer called my contact to discuss document language, Vincent said. He's negotiating small points on the separation terms, asking for a 30-day transition period instead of immediate effect on 2 of the joint ventures. Give him 20 days, Dominic said, not 30, and the injunction filing timeline stays in the agreement as a trigger clause if any condition of the separation is breached in the 20 days it files automatically without further notice. Understood, I'll relay it. A pause. He'll sign, sir. His lawyer is doing his job, but the core terms aren't being challenged. He's not pushing back on the buyout price or the Hargrove separation. He just wants enough room to make it look like he got something. Let him have the 20 days, Dominic said. That's enough. One more thing, Vincent said. Reston made contact with my federal contact at 9:30 this evening. He's cooperating. His attorney was present. He's giving up the full operational structure of the Galvani family's local network in exchange for a plea arrangement. A pause. Which means the Galvani family's local presence here is finished. Not just disrupted, finished. Reston was the whole infrastructure. Dominic let that settle. Good evening, he said. There's going to be a gap in the Port District now, Vincent said. Carefully. When the news of Reston's cooperation gets out, there'll be movement from other interests. I know, Dominic said. Thursday's meeting covers that. Right, another pause. Sir, the Thursday meeting. The Hargrove team confirmed the new venue this afternoon. They're prepared. But heist. Vincent let the name sit for a moment. What do you want to do about Heist? He had been thinking about that. Heist is removed from the project tonight, he said. Draft the notification and send it from the legal team, a standard project realignment professional language, no accusation. He'll understand what it means, and he'll be too exposed to push back. He paused. And Cole gets a call from me personally tomorrow morning. Early. He needs to hear from me directly that his referral was used without his knowledge and that his standing with me is unchanged. That matters. I'll flag it for your morning schedule, Vincent said. Anything else tonight? No, Dominic said. Good work today, Vincent. All of it. A brief pause, the kind that meant the words had landed in the way he'd intended. Thank you, sir, Vincent said, and ended the call. So he went back to the sitting room. Elena was still there, but the legal pad was on the coffee table now, and she had moved to one end of the sofa with her arms crossed loosely, the posture of someone who was tired but not ready to admit it. She looked up when he came in. Reston's cooperating, he said. I heard you on the phone, she said. The walls in this house are thinner than you think. She paused. Which means it's over. The Galvani piece is over, he said. Thursday still has to close. There'll be follow-on work on Ren's separation, and I have to rebuild the operational security of the entire inner circle, because if Marcus had access for 8 months, I have to assume everything he touched needs to be reviewed. He sat down on the other end of the sofa, still the careful distance, but the chair had been a choice, and this was a different choice, and they both knew it. It's not over, but the acute part is over. How do you feel? She asked. The question was direct and undecorated and completely typical of her. No softening, no preamble, just the question. Tired, he said honestly, and something else I haven't finished identifying. She looked at him. 48 hours ago, you were sitting in a chair at 2 a.m. not sleeping, she said. And then I called and you came, and everything since then has been moving at a speed that didn't leave you room for anything that wasn't the next immediate problem. She paused. I think the unidentified thing is probably what happens when you've been running that fast and the ground level's out. Possibly, he said. I know what it is for me, she said. The thing I haven't finished identifying. He looked at her. She held his gaze with the same steadiness she brought to everything, no performance, no deflection, no professional distance, because the professional distance had been dissolved by 48 hours of something real. I called you at 2 a.m. because you were the only person I could imagine calling, she said. Not because you're my employer. Not because I thought you'd handle it efficiently. Because when I was frightened and alone on a street, I shouldn't have been on the only person I wanted was you. She paused. I've known that for longer than last night. I just hadn't said it. The room held the specific quiet of a statement that has been true for a long time and has finally been given the room to exist. Elena, he said. I know, she said. I know what it means. I know what your life is. I've had 3 years to understand it, and I'm not romanticizing any part of it. She kept her eyes on his. I'm also not pretending I feel something I don't, or that I don't feel something I do. That's not who I am. No, he said quietly. It isn't. So, she let the words sit. Say something real. He looked at her for a long moment. The same woman who had pulled heist files in 4 minutes and moved Thursday's meeting through a secondary channel in less time than it would have taken him to authorize it. The same woman who had told him to eat, who had said you already have when he'd told her to trust no one, including him, who had sat on a dark street step and held herself together until he arrived and then only then let herself exhale. I've been careful with this, he said, very deliberately careful, because I believe that careful was the right thing. And now, she said, and now I've spent 48 hours watching you operate under pressure that most people in this building, most people in my world would not have managed as well as you did, he said. And I came back here tonight and you were on that sofa with a legal pad because you were still working, still thinking 2 steps ahead. And I walked in and the first thing you asked was whether I was in one piece. He paused. The careful thing stopped feeling like the right thing somewhere in the last 2 days. She was very still. I don't have a simple life, he said. I can't offer you simple. I know that. I'm not asking for simple, she said. I'm asking for real. He moved slightly along the sofa, closed the careful distance. She didn't move back. Then here is real, he said. I came the second you called. I would come the second you called every time for any reason for the rest of my life if you needed me. That is not an employer's response. That has not been an employer's response for a long time. He held her gaze. And I should have said something about that before it took a crisis to create enough pressure for the truth to come out. She looked at him for a moment that had weight to it, not hesitation, just the taking in of something that mattered. Yes, she said simply, you should have. I know. Don't wait that long again. She said. I won't, he said. And then she leaned forward slightly, and he met her in the careful distance that had been maintained for 3 years through hundreds of mornings and late evenings, in shared silences, in the slow accumulation of two people who understood each other closed entirely. His phone buzzed at midnight. He looked at the screen. Vincent Wren's lawyer accepted the 20-day terms. Documents going to final draft now. Signature expected before 3 a.m. He set the phone down. Elena had seen the notification from where she sat beside him. Wren, she said. Signing, he said. She nodded once, the professional nod, the one that meant filed, processed, moving on. Then she looked at him with something considerably less professional. Good, she said. Yes, he agreed. Thursday, she said. I should brief you on the revised parameters before the meeting. There were 3 adjustments I made to the Hargrove approach when I moved the venue that we haven't discussed yet. Tomorrow, he said. The meeting is Thursday. Tomorrow, he said again more gently. Tonight you have already done more than anyone should have to do in 48 hours. The briefing can wait until morning. She considered arguing with this. He could see the brief internal consideration of it on her face. Then she let it go. Fine, she said. Morning? Early, he said. The cold call is at 7. I know, I'll have the notes ready by 6:30. She paused. I'm going to sleep. Good. She stood. She paused in the doorway. Dominic. He looked at her. When this is all finished, the Thursday meeting, the Hargrove closes the cleanup, I'm going to need a conversation about my role. She held his gaze steadily. Because what I've been doing for the last 2 days is not what my contract describes. And I think we both know that. He looked at her for a moment. What kind of conversation, he said. The kind where we define what I actually am in this operation, she said. Not just on paper, accurately. A pause. Because if I'm going to be the person who moves meetings and builds false financial documents and manages infiltration responses at 2 a.m, I'd like that to be reflected in something other than an assistant's title. He held her gaze. Name what you want, he said. I will, she said, after Thursday. She held his look for one more moment, something quiet and clear in it, something that had nothing to do with the conversation they'd just been having and everything to do with the one before it. Good night. Good night, Elena. She went upstairs. He sat in the quiet of the room for a while, not doing anything, not making calls or reviewing documents or running calculations. Just sitting with the shape of where things had landed after 48 hours that had started with 3 words and a dropped line. His phone buzzed one more time. Not Vincent this time. Arthur. Heard the Galvani situation resolved. Well managed. Thursday still on. He typed back, Thursday is on. Then he added, tell your contacts to watch the Port District over the next 30 days. Things are going to move. Arthur's reply was immediate. They always do with you. He set the phone down and looked at the window for a moment. The city beyond it was doing what it always did at midnight, breathing slow and dark and honest the way it only did when it thought no one was watching. He was watching. He thought about Marcus, who had made a terrible choice under terrible pressure and had spent 8 months trying to quietly unmake it one small piece at a time. He thought about Lily, who was 26 years old and a nurse and had no idea that a phone call had been made tonight about a debt she'd been carrying without knowing it was already handled. He thought about Wren sitting somewhere with his lawyer and his silver hair and the knowledge of what the next 20 days would require, the slow, dignified unwinding of a partnership that had been real, whatever else it had been. He thought about Elena upstairs with her legal pad and her 6:30 briefing notes and the conversation she had promised herself for after Thursday, the one where she would name what she wanted and he would already know what he was going to say. He thought about 3 words at 2 a.m. Can you please? He had not let himself think at the time about what came after the dash. what the third word would have been, what she had been trying to ask in the moment before the line broke. He thought he knew now, and he thought sitting in the quiet of the house he had brought her to because he couldn't bring himself to take her anywhere further away, that it was the same thing he would have asked if he'd been the one calling. Come. He stood. He walked through the house, checked the perimeter notification on his security panel, turned off the kitchen light over the untouched second coffee mug on the counter Kara had left too. He realized, and the small domestic fact of it moved through him with a warmth that was entirely disproportionate to what it was. He went upstairs. He passed the door at the end of the hall and did not stop at it because tonight was not the night for anything more than what had already been said. And that was right. That was exactly right. Some things needed to be built slowly, even when the urgency of the last 2 days made slow feel impossible. He went to the room across the hall and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ceiling. His phone showed 3:12 a.m. when the final notification came. Vincent documents signed. Wren's separation complete pending the 20-day transition. Injunction filing suspended. And then a line later, Hargrove is yours. He set the phone on the nightstand. Outside, the city was quiet. He thought 48 hours ago she called him with 3 words and he had moved without thinking the way you move when something matters more than the calculation of whether to move. The way you move when you have already somewhere beneath all the careful professional distance and the deliberate restraint made a decision that your conscious mind has simply been slow to catch up to. She had said you already have when he told her to trust no one, including him. He thought she had been right then, and he thought she was right now, and he thought that Thursday would close and the Hargrove deal would land and the Port District would shift in the ways it needed to shift, and all of that would be true. And when it was done, she was going to walk into a room and name what she wanted. He was going to be ready. He closed his eyes. For the first time in longer than he could accurately remember, the particular dark behind them was not full of problems to solve. It was simply dark and quiet and enough. He slept.